And hi everybody, welcome to Fresh Outlook, the show where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm your host Taryn Brill, just call me TWB. On today's show, we'll begin by discussing the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act. The House passed it a week ago, so what exactly does it do? We'll find out. Then we'll get into the 3-year anniversary of the BP oil spill. We'll have the latest and where we stand today. From there, we'll remember Richie Havens, a musician and a social activist. Finally, we'll tackle 42, the major motion picture recently released about the Jackie Robinson story. But before we get the conversation started, as always, let's meet this week's all-star panel. Let's begin with Yohuru. Welcome, good to see you again.
Hey TWB, how are you?
I'm well.
Yohuru Williams, Chair of the History Department, historian at Fairfield University.
Welcome, welcome. And we have a new face, Homles.
Hi, good
Tell
to
us
meet
who you are.
I'm Homles Wilson. I'm a co-founder of Fight for the Future, which is an activist organization working to protect internet freedom.
Welcome. So curious to hear your insight on this particular topic. And finally, Lady in Green, Dee Dee.
I'm a political government and cultural commentator, former aide to President Bush, and a blogger.
And looking especially pretty today, I might add.
Oh,
it's
not
all
next
working.
to you, Taryn.
Oh,
I think
go
I
on.
look good until I'm next to you.
Cut
but,
that
you know,
out.
I'm
Stop
okay
it.
to be your second wing.
All right, we digress. Have you heard of CISPA? It's the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, but most don't know what it is, including myself until a few days ago. So let's take a look.
This week, alarms went off across the internet. The culprit? CISPA. Not a new computer virus, but a controversial bill that cleared the U.S. House and threatens, say opponents, to override important privacy protections. Known as the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, its creators say it was written to make it easier for businesses and the federal government to share information on potential digital attacks and to enhance the nation's cybersecurity. However, critics of CISPA say it opens the door to violating civil liberties. Privacy advocates maintain the bill would allow companies to spy on net users and pass on personal information like emails and other sensitive data without a warrant. President Obama had promised to veto CISPA, but now it seems the legislation has died before even making it to a Senate vote. But that doesn't mean the debate is over. Newer, if smaller cybersecurity bills are planned for the near future that will likely bring up many of the same concerns as CISPA. Proponents of internet freedom argue that the web is designed to be a largely anonymous and unregulated space. How long it will remain that way and to what extent is one of the digital age's most enduring questions.
I don't know. What's next? Wiretapping our phones? I'm suspicious. Holmes, let's start with you. Let's just give our audience a little more insight into what CISPA is exactly. How do you put it into words?
Okay, so CISPA, the intention of CISPA is to give companies tools to make their systems more secure by making it easier for them to share information about security vulnerabilities with each other and with the government, by giving them liability protection so they can't be sued for sharing information. The problem is that they never required, in the bill, they never required companies to strip out our personal information before sharing it with the government. So things like, you know, your Facebook photos, your email messages, your text messages, your real-time location if you use a cell phone, all this could be shared with the government under CISPA. So it essentially turned from a cybersecurity bill into a wiretap bill.
It's exactly what it sounds like to me. So I feel like we should be alarmed, right? I'm especially alarmed. What do you think, Yohuru?
Absolutely, we should be alarmed. And we saw these types of abuses in the 1960s in terms of telephonic surveillance used by the FBI to monitor the activities of domestic persons of interest. Civil rights people, for example, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's offices were wiretapped as well as his personal telephone. And these provisions, as Holmes points out, are very broad and broad enough to make all of us be concerned because this is the U.S. military that would be allowed to conduct these searches, these broad searches.
The problem is it does seem a little too broad. Dee Dee, I'm curious to get your insight.
Way too broad. And look, I'm a big security person. I think it's important that we secure our borders, whether it be in the internet, whether it be physically. However, this bill is terrible. So, you know, it's good that it died, and it needs to be brought up again where personal information absolutely should not be, you know, pillaged, basically, is what's going on here. And that's got to change. I mean, you know, do you want the government, do you want senators looking at your personal pictures, your personal texts and emails? No way, it's wrong.
But then again, I mean, we all live in this digital world where everything is out there. Once it's online, anyone can see it. So just to play devil's advocate, is there really that much of a difference between what the government already has access to, Holmes?
Well, I think one thing to remember here is that it's not just you know, spy agencies that would have access to this data. It's everybody from the IRS to the local police, you know, to really random government bureaucrats could access this stuff the way the law was written. And I think the other important point here is that, look, you know, we we depend on privacy to be free politically, but also just to be the best people we can be in our lives. I mean, moments come along where there's something you need to talk about, and you can only talk about it with someone you trust, not to share that information with others.
I just think in this post 9/11 world, rather, privacy, the meaning of privacy, just the parameters of it have completely changed. And honestly, I mean, I know this seems like a wiretap, but I think we all, especially in light of the Boston bombings, every day we sort of live in fear. So I don't know if I'm completely against the government having access to whatever it needs to have access to in order to protect ourselves. Holmes, I wanted to ask you, just tell us, in putting it into sort of everyday terms, the everyday people, everyday society, how would CISPA affect their everyday lives? The average Joe living in Mississippi, how would CISPA affect his life?
Okay, well, right now the government cannot come into your home and just go through your bedroom and search it without a warrant. They need a good reason. They would need to go to a judge, get a warrant. I mean, that's in the Constitution.
Right.
Online, right now, there are similar protections. They're not as strong, and they should be stronger, but there are similar protections. CISPA would throw all of that out the window. And as the personal details of our lives increasingly move online, those moments that we share with people are increasingly online, we would essentially have no privacy protections at all.
Right. And does that bother you?
I mean,
or is it a matter of protection and you're okay with it?
Well, I think it should
stop the bad guys, quote unquote.
I think it should bother all of us, and I think another important point here to respond to this idea of, I know a lot of viewers are thinking about this in terms of a trade-off between security and privacy.
Right.
But let's be clear, this bill isn't about stopping terrorists. It's about protecting systems against malicious hacking, which could be by a foreign government or by individuals or criminals. And there's a lot of other really good ways to do that. There are a lot of other more effective ways to do that than just sitting on these internet connections, watching everything and handing over that data to the government. And a lot of those, frankly, some of the best ways to increase the security of critical infrastructure, like the electric grid and the things they're talking about protecting with CISPA, would really be to require those companies to improve their security systems.
Right.
But companies said, oh no, we don't want to do that.
We
It would cost too much money. They're kind of passing the buck to the government and want the government to do it for them.
Right.
And then it's sort of the situation where the government and big business are both kind of evading responsibility for tackling this problem and passing it on to us, where we lose our most basic constitutional protections.
Right. So it just seems this would be the cheaper way to go, and instead of them having to deal with security issues. I wanted to ask the panel, what do you guys think about the amendment to the bill that would have allowed employers to request passwords, for Facebook, other social media? Dee Dee, you're shaking.
Yeah, very much against this. The bill is just a bad bill. It's not a bad mission, but it was a very bad bill, and they've got to go back and look at it again, not going into the private information, because that's not going to stop hackers. That's not going to. It's not related, but it's very much an un-American thing to do. I think. Look, I don't want to live in China. In China, they absolutely have no privacy whatsoever. I mean, it is our right as Americans to have privacy. And if it's regular mail, it's a federal offense to go into someone's mailbox and take their mail. Why is it different on the internet? I don't see a difference.
But we live in a different world than before the internet. So what do you think?
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, your former boss was fond of saying that the terrorists hated us because of our freedom. I have to say that in the last decade, little over a decade, what we've seen is a retrenchment in American freedom. This is a Fourth Amendment issue. And it's interesting that it took 250 years to build up these protections for civil liberties in this country, for respect for freedom and privacy. Are we going to allow ourselves in 10 years, since 9/11, to allow these forces to come in and say, we're going to take away all of this, all of these protections that took so long to build up? So for me, that's a real problem. I agree with you there, Holmes. It's a serious issue.
It is serious, but it is dead in the Senate. So what happens now? What's next, do you think?
Well, I think it's it's premature to say that it's dead. I mean, CISPA was supported by some of the biggest companies in America. They want that liability protection. They want a solution that doesn't require them to spend any of their own money to secure their systems. And so we're going to see this information sharing thing come up again.
It's going to come back.
In some form in the Senate. It may be smaller bills, it may not be the exact same thing, but it's really important that anyone who is watching and thinks that this is something that that affects them should really be paying attention to the Senate. They should be calling their senator, and you can visit cispasback.org. That's a website we've put up to make it easy for people to contact their senators about this bill.
Right, because like I said, I just think people just don't know. But it did die, but it's not dead forever.
The bill's dead, but the mission's not. They're going to come up with a new bill,
what do you
which will be
think will
different.
change? I mean, what has to change in your opinion?
Well, the easy fix really is to require companies to take out people's personal information before they share this stuff with the government. I mean, sharing if they have information about a new computer virus or a new way that hackers could exploit a system, or there's some attack going on in progress, sure, share that. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
That's how internet security works, is people kind of sharing their knowledge about these vulnerabilities and fixing them. But it's really easy to strip out people's private information. Companies have really sophisticated systems for recognizing what is the private data of their customers. They're good at this. Requiring them to do it is not a burdensome,
Do you think that's
issue.
realistic, though? Do you think that's a realistic change? And do you think
Completely.
it'll pass once that happens?
It can, but I think it's even more than that. I think they need to go further than that you're penalized if you share that information. You're fined, or someone goes to jail. I mean, I think it's very important that we are able to protect our Fourth Amendment right.
Again, I agree. I didn't like the fact that you wouldn't be able to file a Freedom of Information Act request and find out that your information had actually been culled by one of these sources. So there are a lot of holes here, and civil libertarians are going to be against this. I was surprised that we didn't see the reaction, again, that you saw with SOPA, where you had this big response from...
Well, tell us about that. I mean, for people who don't know what SOPA is, how is this different from SOPA?
Well, I think it's different
bill.
primarily because SOPA was about censorship to a certain extent, and the ability of the government to take down sites that they believed in some way were promoting what they would consider to be nefarious activity. Although we saw some of this in the aftermath of Boston as well. CISPA to me is far worse because primarily what you're talking about is the sharing of information on both ends. And as Holmes points out correctly, even though it's not just these spy agencies, I don't know how comfortable I am with Homeland Security or my local police or the IRS culling through data when, if they can do it with the ones and zeros, there's no reason that they need to get the personal information as well.
I have to say, though, from my perspective, I mean, personally, I have nothing to hide. Take my information. Do you think we're just being paranoid here? What do you think, Holmes?
I think there's a real change that happens once everyone knows they're being watched. I mean, I'm sure, even in your case, I'm sure you've had private conversations with friends, with people close to you, having to do with your business, your career, that you just wouldn't want shared with everyone. And it's important for you, professionally, personally, it's important for all of us to be able to do that. It's part of how we're human, right? And I think when you start, when the worst thing that happens when totalitarian governments start spying on everyone is that people just can't be as human anymore. They can't be as compassionate. They can't be as strong. They can't be as...
It's our constitutional right. I mean, this is our American constitutional right, so this is a huge deal. We need to make sure we don't go down the slippery slope.
Okay, do you think we're being paranoid, though?
No.
No? Okay,
I don't.
Yohuru, what do you think?
Not at all. Fourth Amendment is very clear, and I think people need to feel secure in their persons. And we define our penumbras or our areas of privacy very broadly. So technology is important. We saw this with the telephone. I mean, we talked about very similar conversations about telephonic surveillance in the 1960s. 1968 Federal Omnibus Crime Act dealt with similar issues. This is far worse, though, I think, for all the reasons that you identify, Holmes, and I think what we'll see is that people will push back. In the aftermath of Boston, it's very easy for people to become very security conscious and to be willing to give over without recognizing that the implications of this are far greater than just, ferreting out the work of terrorists. This is a fundamental American freedom issue.
Right. We have about a minute left, so let's get some final thoughts on the topic and just sort of what you think is the future of the internet here in terms of privacy.
Wow, that's a big question.
I'm giving you 20 seconds. Ready? Go.
Well, I think it is. I think to some extent, individuals have the power to take control of their privacy into their own hands, and there are tools that let you communicate privately with your friends, where even if CISPA passes, the government would have a very difficult time spying on you. At the same time, I think we need, these changes can create massive shifts in our culture, in our society, if we all of a sudden move into a situation where we know that there are perhaps dozens or hundreds of strangers. People are complete strangers to us, spying on our every move, every photo, everything we say. And I think we need to really be very careful to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Are you optimistic, though, about what's ahead?
I am. I think generally the internet is giving people so much more new power to improve their own lives, to improve the lives of those around them, and that we need to recognize that. We need to kind of make it happen even more, and we need to fight hard against any threats to that new power that's been given to people.
So call your senator, right? Okay, I'm doing that at 3 o'clock. Thanks, guys, for your insight. Appreciate it. We have to take a break. Coming up on Fresh Outlook, the 3-year anniversary of the BP oil spill. It's been 3 years. Feels like yesterday. That's next. Stay with us.